Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Cloud Computing for the C-Suite show with Brad Nelson and internationally recognized and world's #1 cloud industry expert and thought leader, David Linthicum. This show is sponsored by Nelson Hilliard, cloud computing recruitment specialist placing great people in cloud, IoT, fintech and AI. This week we're excited to have as our special guest Joe Kinsella. Joe is the CTO and founder of CloudHealth Technologies, which provides cloud computing services related to cost management, governance, automation, security and performance. CloudHealth Technologies is one of the fastest growing companies in Boston with over 270 plus employees, over 2,000 customers and $86.5 million in funding. The company has been named a 2018 vendor to watch by Information Week. Hi Dave and Joe, a warm welcome to you both. It's exciting to have you both on the C-Suite show this week.
Yeah, it's great to be here again. Joe, it's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks again, Brad. Glad to be on the show. And David, good to chat with you again.
That's excellent. It's great to have you both, guys. Look, in this week, we'll be talking about a very interesting and potentially costly subject. When moving to the cloud, what should those in the C-level do in order to deal with cloud cost management changes? Over to you, guys.
Yeah, this is for Joe. Joe, I'm a CEO, and we're in the cloud. I got 20% of our workloads on cloud, and so ultimately, he feels out of control in the fact that he thinks IT is spending way too much money on this cloud-based technology. He doesn't necessarily understand the ROI that's coming back. He thinks he's getting, and this is quote unquote, hornswoggled, in terms of his ability to kind of have a grasp on the existing cost management of the existing cloud stuff. So while he can read invoices in terms of hardware and software, which he's been doing for the last 20 years, here's cloud, which is really kind of an on-demand thing. And now he's trying to break it out in terms of the value that comes back to the business, in terms of how they're doing it by workload, by person, by department, and in essence, get a grasp on how we're dealing with costs in terms of cloud computing. And by the way, how it relates to existing on-premise stuff. And so I've had a lot of these uncomfortable conversations in the last 5 years. And of course, I started explaining cloud, cost governance and management and things like that, and other systems we can put in there. And that's another line item that has to come in to make it happen. So what is kind of the killer, sell pitch to these guys in terms of what they can expect from this stuff today, as well as a year and 2 years and 3 years down the line? Go to you, Joe.
Sure. I mean, I feel like big change is that we've spent 30 years in a model in which that CEO has to look to other people to understand the costs and report the costs, and then be able to have insight on the costs. And in the post-cloud world, that CEO can now be armed with near real-time information of what's happening across his business. He or she can understand what is occurring from a cost perspective from line of business, can look at how it spans clouds, can align it to business metrics, understand what the true ROI is. So I think we moved to this model where I think many CEOs are not realizing that the cloud enables them to have their fingers on the control panel at all times of costs. And you just have to instrument. You have to go implement a strategy and go drive the changes to give you that level of control and insight.
So you think the C-level should have control of making the policy changes? In other words, they're putting the guardrails up there so that marketing can't spend over $1 million a year on cloud-based services because there has to be an upper budgetary limit as to what they're doing? Or is this something where they're just going to be able to monitor and then do reactive controlling? In other words, go call in the CMO into the office and tell him or her that they're spending way too much money. So how much control do you think these folks should have, or are willing to have, I guess is a better term?
Yeah, I think most CEOs that we talk to, and even CIOs will set the strategy. The CEO really just wants the insight and be able to provide advice, recommendations, and understand when something's trending in the wrong direction. So it's more kind of monitoring and providing business intelligence to the CEO than it is real-time driving changes. But each of the CEO's leaders that report to him or her, it's essential that they actually have a very detailed understanding of what it is they're driving relative to the plan that they adopted in their budgetary cycle.
Yeah, so we have CEOs that are getting more information about utilization, the cloud utilization of IT. And this is something I think you need to chime in. You're more of an SME around this than I am. They haven't seen this information in the last 20 years. They get budgetary information and set kind of budget limits in terms of hardware and software buys and data center buys. But in terms of some of the on-demand stuff, which has been emerging, for the last 10 years with software as a service system, Salesforce.com, coming up, they really don't have the visibility into that. And so it seems to be kind of crossing the chasms for them to kind of meld the whole hardware, software, invoice, budgetary world, which is capital costs, procurement, into this operational cost kind of a system. And it seems like finance is struggling with the ability to kind of compare apples and oranges and actually show the CEO something that's going to make sense to him or her. So or is this going to evolve some way? Because this seems to be a big pain point for the Global 2000 out there.
It will evolve. I think we're in this awkward period right now, David, which is when you step back and look at where we're at, which is many CIOs have promised the cost transformation that would come with the public cloud. And their CFOs are looking and saying, looking and realizing that they're incurring very large and increasing public cloud costs, but at the same time, they still are carrying forward all of their same costs that they had inside the data center. So the costs are kind of stacking on each other as opposed to displacing each other at the moment. And so I think most enterprises are in this phase. And I think it's one of the reasons why you've seen a lot of people reinforce over the last several years that the transformation of the cloud is about agility and innovation. I think it's just been effectively an explanation for why it is that your costs are getting stacked on top of each other. It won't always be that way. We're kind of in this awkward phase where we really haven't decommissioned data centers, but yet we're incurring the cost of the cloud. I think as we fast forward over the next several years, you're going to start to see the true economies of the cloud kick in. It doesn't mean that the public cloud will always be more cost effective than on-premise. In fact, in many cases, that won't be the case. But for certain types of business services, for certain types of workloads, it'll be very disruptive to the bottom line. But we are in this odd phase right now where I think we're not really realizing that potential.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. I mean, ultimately, when we do the metrics in terms of the value that cloud computing can bring into a business, it goes very quickly to agility, innovation, speed to market. Those really kind of opportunities that they don't have, the ability to kind of disrupt the market that they haven't been able to disrupt. A good example would be, automobile manufacturers, the ability to kind of compete with those folks that are basically having frictionless supply chains, the ability to order online, understand the demand of the various systems, be able to react to this stuff in near real time, which has been the dream for the last 30 years. We just haven't been able to achieve it yet, but they're doing it, especially if they're born in the cloud. They're having a Global 2000 company, saying a Global 2000 automobile manufacturer moving in the same direction. And the core question that I would get would be, and not necessarily an automobile manufacturer, but how can I understand the value as it relates back there? So when you're deploying your tools, do you provide metrics in terms of understanding cost optimization, value optimization beyond some of the operational cost stuff?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think we really, since if you kind of roll back from when I started the company back in 2012, the model for several years was the enterprise needs to come to the cloud. And I think we're kind of shifted our mindset, and now it's the cloud needs to come to the enterprise. In other words, it's not about understanding the different components of cloud costs and being able to decipher all of that complexity, for a CIO in an enterprise today. It's more about aligning those costs in ways that the CIO and the rest of the enterprise and line of business leaders can actually manage. So it becomes about what's the cost for outcome that you're driving. And so I think that's a big change that has occurred over the last several years that I think is subtle. Not every enterprise has tapped into it, but those that have actually aligned their costs to business metrics that allow them to actually manage and then to get near real-time information on the costs relative to those business metrics are the ones that really, I think, are kind of breaking through and starting to get the economies of scale of the cloud.
So we're at a point where we're going to see a dashboard, where you're going to see value metrics that basically, go up or down based on the day, based on the ability for the cloud to provide value, allow them to move faster, allow them to move in a more agile manner. I mean, this is something I'm not hearing anybody ask for today, but I just as my curiosity, are we going to get to a point where I'm going to see this on a dashboard on my phone, where people are going, well, how is a cloud adding value to us? And I can, push this thing in their face.
Yes, yes. So in 2010, by the way, David, I was convinced that was something that was coming in the next few years. So here I stand here in 2018, and it's not here yet. But that said, I think that's where it goes. I think we're moving to a model in which we're going to be able to control our costs down to microseconds across the enterprise. This will take years to evolve. But what we'll do is the first phase of this is start to align costs by business metrics. The second phase is to drive continuous optimization of those costs. And then third is to really start to drive it from a strategy perspective, which is to ensure that the strategy for optimization is taking into account what you're trying to achieve for that business service, that business outcome you're driving. And I think this all lands over the next decade in real-time dashboards that allow us to actually move the needle on our business almost continuously from a cost perspective.
Yeah, that would be such a killer application if I had that in my phone where, the client asks, like, how much value am I generating? How much value is cloud computing generating? And of course, I provide a 20 slide PowerPoint presentation, which will bore them to hell. But it'd be great if I could just kind of show them a dashboard, that would have a pin that shows, here's how much cost optimization, operational cost savings, strategic cost savings, time to market cost savings, value generated, EPS generated, all those sorts of things as it comes down. And I think this is a kind of a bigger IT thing also. So I think that we're creating kind of core governance and metrics and, algorithms and kind of ways of doing analytics that not only benefit the cloud, but, benefit the traditional IT stuff as well, the stuff we built 20 years ago, the stuff we built 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and the ability to kind of understand it holistically. So do you see this coming out, or what you're working on, which is typically going to be applied to a particular domain, being stretched into additional domains, traditional systems, things like that people want to account for and basically understand the value for and understand the operational cost benefit for?
Definitely. I mean, we're kind of getting pulled into what would be more traditional financial planning market. And where our customers increasingly want that kind of near real-time understanding of what their costs are. So I think there's this transformation going on, but it will take years. I think at this point in time, I think if you look across the spectrum of our customers, many of them are improving their ability to manage costs. Some are quite advanced in their ability to manage costs, but not all have aligned all of their different costs to the business metrics. And as you know, those business metrics change based on the business service and business outcome that you're trying to drive. So across an enterprise, there could be hundreds, in some cases thousands, of different ways that you need to go look at different business services to understand what the economics of them are. But I think we're in the, I would say we're in the early phases of this transition to a model in which we'll manage it real time.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So Brad, as you're, out there talking to, different C-levels, are they requesting that we understand the value metrics, the cost metrics of cloud-based systems, and we need people who do this? Or is this something that is still evolving and still emerging?
Well, I agree with both of you on the constant evolving of how this is playing out, and I think the real-time auditing of services and certainly the implementation of services is something that's becoming certainly a lot higher on the priority list out there. And I was actually going to throw a question to Joe about this, that not only is there an awareness now of from what we're talking about, the awareness of the usage of cloud and the return on investment of cloud, but that then does spill down into the hiring process, because you identify the key needs from an employment point of view of getting the right skilled individuals in that can fulfill the streamlining of the auditing process. So it kind of really sits like that, doesn't it, Joe, as well? So it's not only from a cloud base, but into the physical world, getting the right people in to fulfill the right projects.
Without a doubt. I mean, and as you know, across the globe, we're all struggling with a serious talent crunch when it comes to cloud resources. And I think, I think it's something that almost every enterprise across the globe is struggling with in one way, shape, or form. And part of it is getting the right people in the door. But the pace of change of the cloud is so fast but that's not good enough anymore. You also have to, take existing resources that are not cloud, knowledgeable, and you have to train them. And you have to take your existing resources who are cloud knowledgeable, and you have to constantly invest in their training as well. So I think it's there's a big challenge around talent development that enterprises have to be very thoughtful about.
100%. It's funny actually because David and I spoke in a couple of shows ago about that forward-thinking procedure of people that are looking to move into cloud from a non-cloud environment, and they're looking to get a career in cloud. It's almost second guessing the identifying the companies that you want to work for, understanding what they're going through at the moment, and then second guessing almost the technologies that company is going to adopt. So you're almost ahead of their business plan, so you can at least go in with the right mindset that not only can you perform in a cloud environment based on your previous skill sets and you're willing to learn, but you're also second guessing where the market's going to go within that organization, and show that and demonstrate that you've got the right mindset to learn and the ability to turn it around so quickly. And I'm also seeing as well that when I have these conversations with people, it's very good to identify the key mindset capabilities of these individuals when it comes to not only technical but soft skills. I'm finding that a very important part of creating a healthy IT department or a cloud team of people, whether it be DevOps or whatever it would be, is the soft skills really make people accountable nowadays, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would completely agree. I also think one of my customers kind of talked to me about this kind of fascinating perspective his organization had. And it was a large financial institution, and it was this concept around the tipping point, which is, when you're dealing with a transformative technology like cloud computing, once you train, once you hire, once you get this small group of people who are driving this technology, to sustain it, you actually need to continue to grow that group, so that they're working with people who also have that same level of passion, that same level of interest. And so I think it doesn't just start and stop when you get the resources in. You actually have to grow it till you get to a tipping point. In fact, they actually quantified the tipping point across their organization, at which point it was like a flywheel that would continuously spin, and the innovation really had taken hold. But before that, it was at risk because they didn't have enough people to grow their center of excellence around cloud computing.
Yeah, and that really hits on a strong point that I often like to talk about, and that's work culture. Because you can have the best engineer or the best scientist that just doesn't work with that culture, and that can break down the whole ecosystem and for the good of the project as well. I'm not saying not everyone's perfect and not everyone's going to work with everyone, but there's a certain understanding and identifying the culture. And I think you're absolutely right that if you don't have a big enough group of people working on a project, it's very difficult to identify what that culture looks like. And it can be a bit hit and miss, can't it? But I think for the good of the company, I always try and find out what is the culture, what is the type of person you're looking for. Otherwise, we're just going to be putting a square peg in a round hole.
Yes. Yeah, agree. And one of the interesting things I don't see many people talking about is the fact that we're in this phase where we've kind of incubated the cloud within most organizations most large organizations that existed pre-cloud. And so we've incubated and we've created organizations that were kind of isolated from the rest of the organization. But for the full transformation to actually occur, the cloud needs to move out across the broader enterprise and needs to be embraced. And part of that means we have to do retraining at a much larger scale than we've done today. And I think that's an interesting challenge that's on the horizon that we're all going to confront.
Yeah, I completely agree. Dave, what are your thoughts on all of that?
No, I think he's absolutely right. So in other words, we're trying to, in essence, kind of figure out how this stuff, fits into the learning, the cultural stuff, the business processes, and it really kind of reaches all angles. In fact, I've been kind of focusing in the last year in terms of understanding, how deep this stuff goes. And if we're making a technological shift, which cloud computing is, it's probably the most significant systemic shift we've made, since we did automation, back in the 60s and 70s. Ultimately it's going to have the reaches and have different organization changes, different kind of training changes, different kind of, culture changes, political changes inside these organizations, to the point where I think a lot of organizations end up going to be on the outs because they can't make the changes, and they're ultimately going to be beaten by the smaller companies, or the bigger companies able to adopt the technology and disrupt their markets and actually outpace them and beat them into the ground, and ultimately there'll be acquisition targets. And if you look at the Global 2000, that's about 10 to 20% of the roster today in terms of companies that I really think are in danger of falling out of their market because they're not embracing the technological changes. They can't change their culture. They can't change their business models. They can't change lots of things because they're not willing to change. And so it's going to be interesting to watch, what happens in the next 5 years.
Yes, it certainly is. It certainly is. Well, guys, thanks for a great show this week. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been thoroughly entertaining. We covered some great points, and hopefully the C-levels are going to get some great insight into the governance and how this is all going to come about. Joe, it's been great having you on the show. Thanks for being a part of the C-Suite show this week.
Thanks again, Brad. Appreciate it. And Danny, good to chat with you again.
You got it.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks for being part of the C-Suite show, as always. It's great to have you on board. Thanks for watching, everyone. We really hope you enjoyed watching the C-Suite show this week. Remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos or previous videos for that matter. You can reach Joe on Twitter, which is at Joe Kinsella, and you can also reach the company, which is at CloudHealth Tech. I'm also on Twitter, which is at Nelson_Hilliard. And remember, we've also got podcasts now of all the shows and the weekly news. So remember to get yourself over to iTunes and search us out on that one. But thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed watching this week's show.